Street Neighborhood Initiative in Roxbury, Massachusetts in the late 1980s. Dudley Neighbors Incorporated, DNI, is a solidarity organization that promotes affordable housing and community control of development and land in the Dudley neighborhood. DNI also promotes the community-led trust model throughout Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Tony Hernandez is a leader in advancing Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative and the organization's work to reclaim brownfields in the community while avoiding resident displacement. Tony has lived on the Dudley Land Trust for the past 20 years. He has a master's degree in architecture and has played an integral role in community development and ensuring affordable housing for low-income families in his community. Tony will be speaking to us tonight about the community land trust model and how they are currently using it to enable equitable redevelopment of commercial space. And I'll hand it to you, Tony.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Maya. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, folks from Our Revolution Arlington, for this invite. Again, my name's Tony Hernandez. I come to you by way of Boston, Massachusetts. I'm probably the furthest from a lot of you folks. But I'm happy to jump into this conversation. Man, the panelists before this are dropping some awesome knowledge. You got my wheels turning. There are things. We're swimming in the same water, folks. We're swimming in the same water. We just got to figure out how to make the rubber meet the road on some of these ideas. I love what I'm hearing. Thank you for having me tonight. I wanted to walk you guys through who we are. And I'll be showing you some slides shortly, just a brief background, right? Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative is a nonprofit organization that was established back in 1984 as a result of the community coming together to fight redlining that was going on in our neighborhood. There was arson for profit going on in our neighborhood, illegal trash transfer stations, and one of the things that we were able to do as a community was come together and fight for this community. It was a disinvested community. So as I mentioned, in '84, Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative became this community organizing nonprofit organization. And as a result of the underinvestment that was happening in our neighborhood, they put up a good fight with folks from the city, and residents got together and organized and went into, at the time, the mayor's office and kind of pushed the agenda with the mayor and saying, we not only want you to invest in our neighborhood because it's utterly underserved, but we want to have a level of community control and voice over the process. And Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative was granted something that not many other nonprofit organizations were granted since then, or practically ever, and that was eminent domain over what was more than 1,300 empty parcels of land in our neighborhood, and you'll see a map of that shortly. And as a result of that, there was an arm raised in victory towards eminent domain over 1,300 empty parcels of land, and now we have control over what happens with our neighborhood to some degree. And with the other arm, folks are going, what the heck are we going to do with 1,300 empty parcels of land, right? These are community organizers. No one was an architect, a developer, a contractor, an engineer, understood how to read floor plans. And so in 1984, Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative established as a community organizing entity, and they created Dudley Neighbors Incorporated, the logo you see in front of you, in 1989, 5 years later. This community land trust that was intended to figure out how to build something on these 1,300 empty parcels of land. That was a process that was led by the community for the community. And over time, it became a matter of collaboration with local partners, with city officials, with city members, and developed into a very strong relationship, as you'll see as I share this story with you. For folks that aren't familiar with the community land trust model, this slide is kind of that ABC version of what the heck a CLT is. So essentially, my job as director of Dudley Neighbors Incorporated is to be kind of the gatekeeper to provide, stewardship towards affordable housing, community gardens, civic buildings, commercial spaces, and other entities, other assets on behalf of the community. When I say on behalf of the community, that entails more meetings than you'll ever want to have in a lifetime. For the community organizers on the call, you know what I'm talking about. And so all the decision-making processes go through a community conversation and understanding what folks want to see built on particular parcels, how they want to see it done, what the design standards are, where we're trying to find money from, how are we trying to um, find the right monies to build these things and keep them affordable. And one of the cornerstone models of our mission statement is to produce development without displacement. A lot of the projects that I work on, I continue to remind myself, am I fulfilling that goal as a mission and value of our organization, is to develop without displacing those that are living locally. And so that's kind of the ABCs of what a community land trust model is. Essentially, the thick line that you see is the land that will forever be owned by the organization, by Dudley Neighbors Incorporated. We build something on top of it in collaboration with the city, with developers, with contractors, engineers. In this case, you see a home. We sell the home to a deserving family that meets criteria of affordability, folks that are local, and we find ways to get them the opportunity of home ownership in this case. And the covenant that marries the house to the land is what we call a ground lease. And we strike 99-year ground leases with our homeowners on the land trust. And so essentially we'll never give up the land. And that's by design, because we do not want speculative eyes to creep up and take this land over, nor gentrification to rear its ugly teeth and take a bite into something that they should not own. And so the community land trust model puts this protective bubble over these parcels of land. And the more that we can bring into that portfolio, the more preservation we create, and the more impactful we can be towards helping people actually achieve opportunity in their lifetimes, in this case, home ownership. And I'll talk about small businesses very shortly. I wanted to show folks some before and after shots. This is one of the streets here in Dudley, in the Boston area where I live. Back in '87, this is what Alexander Street looks like. As a result of a lot of the community organizing and redevelopment in the neighborhood, we've been able to beautify the site and build homes and create opportunity and beautification in the neighborhood. That is something that shouldn't exist in areas where there's a ton of money. It should exist everywhere. It's just a matter of how much work you're putting into it. I'll take a step back and let folks, for dramatic effect, see the differences between these sites. Here's another site in our neighborhood that I do tours often, and I walk through. If you notice the triple yellow decker home off in the distance, this field was very barren. These were part of the empty parcels that we've owned over the past 30 years. And so that was Winthrop Street then. This is what Winthrop Street looks now. Notice the triple yellow decker house in the corner. And this park was beautified by the city, but is surrounded by community land trust homes that we built over the years and put deserving families in. And as a result of closing off the perimeter to this site, the city said, made a decision to beautify this park. And what's wonderful that I'm looking forward to getting back to after COVID hopefully goes away forever and ever is the block parties that we throw in this park. And we throw barbecues, the music is going, folks are sitting on their front porches, and there's, believe it or not, there's a communal presence in the air where neighbors are meeting neighbors. You're watching over your neighbors' kids. You're really investing in your neighborhood in a manner that is much more family oriented versus the very private distancing that a lot of society sees today. Here's another area of our neighborhood that were empty parcels back then, and we're able to you know, the inheritance of the eminent domain vehicle to take over these parcels and build homes on. That was then, and this is what it looks like now. We have homes built on these sites that are part of the land trust portfolio. So DNI owns this land, will forever own this land, but the properties, the homes belong to the homeowners. The land is theirs to control. That's why we strike the 99-year ground leases with them, so that they can use these properties as if it's theirs. The reason we strike a ground lease is to provide some level of restriction to what happens with the site. One, as I mentioned before, to keep it out of the speculative market, to keep it out of the ugly teeth of gentrification, but it also allows for the home to remain affordable in perpetuity. So there's language in our ground lease that puts an appraisal cap on the value of the home. The homeowner does get to take something out of the property in terms of appraisal value, but we close that faucet so that whenever these homeowners are ready to move on to something bigger and better, if God so allows them to do that, or they choose to remain on the land trust, that the home remains at an affordable price well below whatever the market rate is at any point in time. So it's by design. This is what we call the Dudley Triangle. All the colored blocks that you see on the map are parcels that were once empty and that are now occupied by either a single family home, either occupied by a building with, you know, 30, 40, 50 rental units in it. We have multiple farms in our portfolio. We have greenhouses, we have playgrounds. And this is all a process over the past 30 plus years that has been led by a community process in collaboration with city officials, city partners, local neighborhood partners, banks, law firms. One of the things that I will forever preach in this line of work is that you need to have the right people at the table to make this work. This entire effort that we're making and the wonderful things that the panelists before me have shared were just reminding me that, you know, in this life, this is one big game of chess, and each one of us serves a particular chess piece on that chess board. We need someone with the money. We need someone who knows how to write the law. We need someone who understands how to impact policy, but we need the grassroots organizers, obviously, right at the base of that. And if you have the right people at the table and you can, you know, put the right pieces on the chessboard, it's a matter of strategy and how you make the moves to try to win the game. And that's how we've been able to result in producing the portfolio that we have today, 30 years into it, since the inception of this organization. One of the really cool things that I had an MIT grad student do for me back in 2014 was produce a map. He wanted to focus his thesis on what the community land trust model does, and he wanted to specifically focus on something. So I asked him to dig up as much information as he could for me based on foreclosure. I was curious to know how much foreclosure has impacted this neighborhood. And as you can see on your slide, between 93 and 2014, over a 21-year period, over a 2.5-mile radius from the center of this map, which is where our office is also located, we had 494 foreclosures. And then we dwindled it down to the gray area that you see shaded, which represents the catchment area for DSNI at the community organizing level. Those foreclosures dropped to 365. Then you see the Dudley Triangle, which is where the predominance of our portfolio exists right now. That dwindled down to 22 foreclosures inside the Dudley Triangle. And of course, the million-dollar question was, how many of those actual homes were land trust properties? I wish I could tell you 0 tonight, but the answer is 4. Homeowners that got into financial troubles of sorts, lost their jobs, and unfortunately had too much pride to allow my predecessors and the organization to help them find ways to keep their homes. And so unfortunately they lost their homes, but then we got into an arm wrestling match with the banks to assure that the homes remained in the portfolio. And so if you look to make the argument of, you know, how powerful can a community land trust model be? Well, the impactful statement here is that over 21 years in time frame, over a 2.5-mile radius, right, over 494 properties that existed within that catchment area, only 0.081% of that number were actual land trust homes that were impacted. And so the preservation of affordability and longevity of property ownership is something that the community land trust model is intended to have muscles at. And I can't prove it to be 100% fact, but this makes for a compelling argument. And during the foreclosure crisis that we went through here in the United States, I'm proud to say there were 0 foreclosures on our community land trust. And I like to think as a result of the way that this model is intended to work. Here in this slide, we're looking at is where we're at today. 30 plus years later, we have 97 single family homes. We have 130 affordable rental units. We have a 10,000 square foot greenhouse, multiple farms, community gardens. We have a recently purchased about just over 2 years ago, a 20,000 plus square foot former bank building, which I'm hot and heavy working with now to figure out what the next community move is for that property. 14,000 square foot site where we're also looking to build a mixed use commercial building. We have more housing coming onto the land trust. And of course, the most important piece, I think, lastly, but definitely not the least, is the hundreds of families and the thousands of community members that have been served over these plus 30 years. This particular property here is one of our commercial properties. DNI outright owns this home. We converted it into an office space. The first floor is a flower shop. The woman who's run the flower shop there pays rent, well below whatever a market rent is. I'm very sure of that. And the second floor we rent out for folks that are looking to find small office space and to build their business until they're ready to get to the next level. So the rent that they pay come into the organization, helps me keep my doors open, run the operations, while we also try to give small business owners an opportunity to grow and to afford a space that will allow them to grow their business and their ideas. This is a 14,000 square foot space that we have that is on my radar, and it's slated now for a 3 to 4 story mixed use commercial building, as was decided by the community through a number of community meetings. I would bring slides like this and ask the community, what would you like to see us build on this site? So that we can make sure that language makes its way into an RFP, and that the community benefits that folks want to see is also woven into the RFP, so that developers are bringing something to the community that isn't necessarily a moneymaker, but something that can serve the community for years to come. And if you look up at the top of this picture, that's the 10,000 square foot greenhouse that we own on the land trust. It's run by an organization called the Food Project. They operate the actual greenhouse, while DNI in perpetuity will own the land that sits underneath it. And we've leased out this property to be run as a greenhouse for the next 99 years. Anything that changes between that time requires you to go through a community process and through our organization, because it is a community-led process. And if you look at this site, I just got off a meeting before I jumped on this call. The building that is circled on your picture is a former bank building. The last bank to run in there was Citizens Bank. And we now own this property and are going through a process with the city. The city is a partner with us because they are developing other buildings around this very area. I'm not sure if folks can see my mouse. So DNI owns this property. The city is looking to redo this property across the street, this lot over here, and this parking lot back behind here where I'm hovering my mouse. There's a big pipeline project coming down the road, and it's an incredible process. I haven't come across one that a case study that is similar to this. So in a way, I feel like we're writing the book on it. It's very much like a roller coaster ride. It's exciting, but scary at the same time. Nonetheless, my charge is to make sure that for our building, that there is a community-led process, that the language in the RFP is reflective of the desire and the voice of the community in whatever ends up being erected on this site. And I love the ideas and the things that I heard from the previous panelists on small businesses. As we look at this, right, the community members have been like, well, how do we establish small businesses in this property? One of the variables in this project that is required is affordable housing units. The money that we got to purchase this building was from a city program called the Acquisition Opportunity Program through the city of Boston. So they gave us, us being DNI, the organization, the money to purchase this property. So now we have it within our portfolio at a community level. We put it through the ringer at the community level process to make sure that it's community led. Nonetheless, the city is hand in hand walking with us to make sure that the partnership is strong and that the transparency is there. City officials, right, are at the table. Community members are at the table. Lawyers, bankers are all at the table. And it's a very rich dialogue, not easily solved, but nonetheless, the right people are at the table and we are grinding through this process so that at the end of the day, whatever sits on this site for generations to come is something that will serve our community and bring, work, enforcement and youth jobs and an opportunity for small businesses to have a chance at growth. One quick idea about how we help small businesses that we've been talking about is how do we find foundations and/or philanthropists or ways for the city to allocate dollars that we can put in an unrestricted fund to assure that square footage costs are much more affordable when folks are trying to initiate businesses, to buy them at least a year, maybe even 2 of time to build their business up so that they can catch up to affording more of what could be market rate, but nonetheless giving them an opportunity to get their foot in the door. And some of the panelists before me touched on some of these ideas, which I'm excited to hear that, we're not the only ones talking about this stuff. And so as far as Dudley Neighbors Incorporated is concerned, we continue to figure out how to expand the CLT model and how to share the successes and failures. Frankly, right, you have to fail in order to reach points of success in many things in life. And so we share these ideas. By example, me speaking tonight before you folks is us sharing our story. Building the CLT movement, we have a Greater Boston Community Land Trust Network where there are about 8 to 10 members of different neighborhoods throughout the city at different scales trying to initiate community land trust. And so we're sharing our ideas and figuring out how do we bring things to scale that serve the community in a manner that is fair. I'm not saying oversaturate and let it be taken over by the community, but how do you level the playing field, as mentioned by one of my colleagues earlier, in making sure that it's not only about the rich, it's not only about the middle income, but also thinking about the lower income folk and how do we give them an opportunity to step up? And then, increasing supports and resources for current residents. One thing that's very important in this line of work, I guarantee for everybody on the call, and you'd be remiss if you didn't practice it. If the community, if the residents, if the small businesses are not at the core of what you're master planning for those neighborhoods, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. One of the battles from the beginning was that it shouldn't be a top-down process and it can't be a bottom-up process because we don't have the resources. Let's figure out a way to meet in the middle. And educating and empowering the community is equally as important as any other member that comes to the table. Talking with banks, understanding how to produce mortgage products so that we can lower that bar and help the less fortunate reach the goal of home ownership. Trainings and workshops for the residents, as I mentioned. Education and empowerment is key. Promoting the CLT model. And one thing that we've taken advantage of as an organization, which I'm sure can exist in other parts of the world, we've taken advantage of the Community Investment Tax Credit Program through the City of Boston, where we apply as a CDC, as a Community Development Corporation, and we get awarded credits through the City of Boston where any person or organization that donates a minimum of $1,000 can receive a 50% tax credit, come tax season. And so the organization has this opportunity to use these unrestricted dollars towards all these things that I've spoken about, while the donors have the opportunity to either take, tax relief come that time of the year, or get half of this money back and put it back in their pockets and hopefully reinvest it in some other organization. And I thank you folks for allowing me to to share some of these things. Every single panelist on here, I'm sure could go for an hour plus. I can make that same argument, but I thank you for letting me share what I have. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Tony. We really appreciate that. This has been a very fascinating. I mean, the Dudley Street is very famous amongst those of us who have been doing looking into housing affordability and advocacy for a long time. So it's really amazing to have you here talking about what you all have accomplished there, especially looking at it from this angle, how versatile this model has been in terms of doing affordable housing, but also now being able to pivot to affordable commercial space. So I think we'll probably have some questions for you.